Okay. Well, welcome everyone today. It's really lovely to be here. And thank you very much, Florence, for inviting everyone here today. I just want to give everyone a little bit of background about myself. I trained as a naturopath, herbalist and iridologist about 17 years ago with Holistic Health College in London. And I very much focused as a very general naturopath for a number of years. And it was really only when my son, who's now 12, started displaying a lot of signs of dyspraxia and attention deficit. And we had a lot of concerns about his ability to write, his ability to focus, and also we found that he had never really, everything was about him. Even though he'd grown out of the toddlerhood, he should have been more aware of other people. He was very unaware of the rest of the world. And we had a lot of concerns about him, and we talked to school and they said, well, we'll look at him when he's 8, we might give him some occupational therapy. And we thought, well, he's 5 and we know he's always had tummy problems, maybe there is a link. And so I started researching, and because I'd been a naturopath, he had a good diet, he'd been on some probiotics, he'd been on fish oils, we'd done some of the basics, but he still wasn't right. And anyway, so I did lots of research, and I did a couple of courses, and basically I tested him. I went and we drew some blood, we took some urine, took a stool test, and it was remarkable what came out. He had a big amoeba in his gut, which was causing overload in his gut. He was having soiling and so forth. He had double the amount of lead he should have in his system. He had very high arsenic. He was very low in magnesium. He was low in zinc. So we had an awful lot to work on. His actual food allergies and things were fine, actually. So luckily we didn't have to change his diet dramatically, but we did ramp things up because we had to get the nutrition back into him. And it was remarkable. Within a week of doing all of this, changing everything, he went from back to front tempi, piece writing to joined up writing. I thought, wow, this is cool, this is great. And about 2 or 3 weeks later, he got into bed and gave me this massive hug. Now, he was a child that would never like to be hugged or touched. Even as a baby, he didn't want to be comforted. He always wanted to be away. And I've always found that really sort of difficult to deal with. And he came and he gave this massive hug, and he said, Mummy, it feels nice now, I can hug you. And all his skin sensitivities had gone away. Things like cutting nails, brushing teeth, cutting hair had always been an absolute nightmare. And suddenly he was calm and he wanted all these things. He was fine for these things to happen. And he wanted to hug, and he's really cozy now. And it's just, it really brought the whole family together because, things like he had very little empathy for his little sister, and suddenly they were playing together, and all these things came together. It was really exciting. And as the schools do, they tend to assess it's not really IQ, it's called their CAT scores, their raw CAT scores. At that time, he was around the 100 mark, 102, 103, something like that. And anyway, he got reassessed at about 7 or 8, and he was averaging at about 122. And one of his markers was 138. So we went right up, both with proof with the school and sort of academically and sort of intelligence quotient wise that he was doing better too. So it wasn't like we were making it up. School had muted that they wanted him to go to a special school, and he'd been absolutely fine. He's had a little bit of learning support, but he's about to do his 13 plus, and he's going to a really lovely, really great school. So he's got lots of friends. Again, friends were a big issue. So we worked on lots of different levels with him, and he's a star. And if you walked in now, you would think he was just a great lad. So we're very proud of him, and he's worked really hard too. So nothing happens overnight. I did have to roll up my sleeves. I had to get cooking a lot more fresh stuff. I'd always done organic. Lots of things I'd done, but there was more things that we had to do to get his gut right. Yes, the detoxing was massive for us. It was the big thing. Where did this lead come from? Where did this arsenic come from? Funny enough, he was a bright little boy when he was little. He was talking early, he was walking early, he was doing all these things. We thought he was really intelligent. He loved books and so forth. And it was when we moved house, and our house is beautiful, but it's very old, and the first thing we did was to change all the windows, and of course there was an awful lot of old lead paint in the atmosphere, and we think that's probably where things went downhill, because he'd done okay at nursery, and it was really when he got to school that things changed. It all coincided. So I think that's where it came from. And we've all shown quite high lead in our hair when we've tested. So I think that that's probably the source of it. And because he was very constipated and he had this encoprasis issue, that it sort of compounded in him more than it affected us, for instance. So anyway, that's my story. Anyway, so of course I started telling everyone about this amazing stuff, and I had quite a big client base already, and I started seeing people's children, and I couldn't believe how many children, how many of the patients that I was seeing had kids with learning problems, with autism, with ADHD. Is this really true? You know, because actually when we were young, I don't really remember it being an issue at all. Dyslexia was probably mild. It was a problem for some people in my husband's family. I certainly have dyslexia in the family. But it wasn't a global issue, and it's become much more. There seems to be a lot more anxiety, metabolic issues, autoimmune issues, allergies. You know, the world's changing, and this is where I'm going to start off explaining why I think this, in my world, why I think there is a problem and why things are getting worse and why these numbers are going up. You know, where do you go from 1 in 10,000 children being diagnosed with autism to 1 in 57? And some say that the more up-to-date figures are looking at more like 1 in 24 boys. So, you know, it's getting scary. So whether, you know, those are, you know, again, those figures haven't come out, but it's what they will come out in the next year or so once they've actually, you know, collated them properly. So we're thinking that it must be something to do with our environment, the way we're living. You know, a lot of these things have come on, particularly in Western societies, and also societies that have moved into becoming westernized more recently. So we're looking at a lot of the Somalians who've come to the UK. You know, suddenly autism isn't really big over there and it's massive over here amongst the Somalian communities. And again, you know, there are some of the Native American tribes as well who, again, didn't exist, and suddenly not only are there great learning difficulties and autism and ADHD and things like that, but there's also obviously the obesity and diabetes and so forth, and it must be to do with the change of diet, the change of environment, the way we're bringing up our kids these days. Everyone is affected in a different way, and there's no two children that are the same. Every single child has their different challenges and needs, and why I like to test is to find out basically how to quantify that and to see what the most important things are, because I remember reading a book years and years ago on sort of attention deficit, and you know, I came out thinking I would have to give Barney 70 supplements a day or something, which was just ridiculous because he needed this, and so actually the testing makes it much more focused. There's always more supplements than you ever believe are going to be given, though, because it's amazing how there's never one thing. Very rarely do we find that you do all these tests and there's one thing wrong with the child and you fix that and, you know, suddenly the child blossoms. It's an accumulation, and this is where my bucket theory comes in, and I'm going to explain. So, not very glamorous, I'm afraid, but I do see our bodies like a bucket. And when we're born, we do have a degree of toxicity in our system. Mums will pass toxins on to the child. We know it is a very toxic world. We ingest many toxins on a daily basis, whether it's off-gassing from the floors, whether it's cleaners, whether it's, you know, whatever it is. And so we probably, when we're born, we probably have a little bit of toxicity in the bottom. Maybe, you know, mum's taken some antibiotics when they're pregnant, or, you know, their toothpaste or whatever. You know, you've got a little bit in there. And for the healthy person, the person with great metabolism, great genes, a healthy lifestyle, that bucket's not going to fill up till you're 60, 65. That's really when the statins kick in, the arthritis medication kicks in, whatever it is, thyroid. So most people do pretty well, you know, and their bucket does not fill up with the toxins until, you know, much later on. Now, there's a percentage of the population that we probably know in our generation that have been affected that little bit earlier. So, you know, you've got your friends who had glandular fever as a teenager, never quite knocked it. maybe people with allergies, maybe people with early onset autoimmune disease like a juvenile rheumatoid arthritis or something like that. We all know those. So those are the people where their bucket's filling up a little bit more quickly than other people, okay? And so their bucket has got full by the time they're 15, 16, 17, and that's where they start to show these great big symptoms. And your body is going to be able to cope with a bucket load, but as soon as the bucket gets to the top, that's where the symptoms start showing. So in a child, and now with the children today, mums are probably born with a bit more toxicity than they were. If your child's the eldest child, the child that's affected the most, it's very often that there is a toxicity picture with the mum. Because, when do you clean yourself up before you get pregnant? You usually don't. You usually get clean once you're pregnant. But, very often, unless you've been trying for years to have a baby, very frequently, you've been out partying, drinking lots of coffee, working too hard, eating the rubbish, whatever, because you haven't thought about it. And as soon as you get into mummy mode, then that's different. So people are, and also, people are traveling a lot more, so they're having a lot of travel vaccines. They're having a lot more medications. Oh gosh, I've got a headache. Let's take another Nurofen. Et cetera, et cetera. The pill. The mums are getting more and more toxic. So there's that. Very often you pass a lot of toxins onto your child, and then you go to your second child. Of course, you've cleaned up your act a bit. You're not going out on the town every weekend. So you're eating. You're generally eating a bit better. You're cooking a bit more, and so often the second child has a little bit less problem. So very often I see the eldest child's autistic, the middle child's a bit dyslexic, and then the third child is radiant and happy and fine. They go, where did that come from? Why has that happened? And it's because, so that's a toxicity picture. Sometimes though, if the mum actually underlying has got a health issue, usually an autoimmune issue, even if it's known or unknown, that's where it can go the other way. So you can have the eldest child's really healthy, then the middle child is a bit dyslexic, and the little child is, there's something a little bit more going on. And sometimes because the mum's very depleted, maybe it's just because they've been working really hard, they haven't really fed themselves very well, they've been highly stressed, or the babies are very close together. Very often, you see sort of 12 months apart or 13 months apart, and she just hasn't recovered. She's been breastfeeding, and then fallen pregnant again or something, and very often you see that too. So we're really looking at sort of, anyway, with these children, what happens is, unfortunately, is they're usually born pretty bonny and they've got their toxins in the system. Mum's been eating once a month when they're pregnant. No. But, and maybe what happens is very early on they get an infection, or mum gets an infection. So maybe mum's given antibiotics at birth because they've got a strep infection, or, there's a mastitis going on, or the child gets some, early onset infection. It's usually really scary. They're going to be given antibiotics, whether it's IV or whatever. And this can disrupt their whole gut flora. And this is where things can go slightly wrong. Is, for instance, you've got a little infection, here we go, and this is an ear infection, for instance. This is actually an ulcer, this one, but anyway, say this is an ear infection, and you're taking the antibiotics, and what happens is maybe it only clears most of it, but not all of it. Very frequently you see how often are they getting these ear infections? You say, oh gosh, every 6 weeks. That infection's never quite gone. It's the same one. It takes about 6 weeks for it to come back. So you can keep on, if you don't knock it all out. So it may have been the wrong choice of antibiotics, or the wrong course, or it may be that it wasn't actually a bacteria, it was a viral infection, but it's been treated with antibiotics. But whatever it is, this infection hasn't gone. And what we're finding is that when you test, these kids have very, very high bacterial levels, very high yeast levels, very high viral titers. So they've never quite got over some infection. This is measles, maybe that was the MMR. I know there's a big controversy over MMR, but I've seen a lot of kids whose parents say that their children did go backwards or regressed after it. And we found very high measles titers in their blood. So, you know, whether it's right or wrong, whether Andrew Wakefield was right or wrong, we don't know. But what we do know is we are finding evidence of high measles titers in a lot of these kids, and that the parents are reporting that shortly after the vaccine, they are going downhill. They're having diarrhea, they're having fevers, you know, they're going off their food, they're regressing, they're losing their speech, etc. So, you know, and things like vitamin A can be very helpful at helping to bring down these titers and so forth. So there's things you can do. But there's also, you know, this bucket keeps on filling up. You know, we've got, you know, tonsillitis, we've got, you know, a bit of H. pylori or whatever it might be in there. You know, I've had a few kids that have been bitten by ticks very early on, and they've developed Lyme's disease. You know, we've got a lot of things where there's a huge amount of pathogens. Now, these pathogens in themselves, whether they're mild ones, where they're not really problematic, we're not talking about the E. coli and salmonellas or big things that are going to kill you, but we're talking about things that, you know, little infections, streptococcus infections that never go away. If anyone's got a child with OCD, there's been a big link between OCD and streptococcus infections. There's a condition called PANDAS or PANS, and very high, again, they have these titers when you do the bloods of incredibly high strep. Strep should be under 200, and we're finding 400, 800, even 1200 in the results. So again, that needs great management, and often when you treat the strep, the OCD goes away, extraordinary enough. I don't have any Calpol, couldn't find a Calpol box, but I found a Nurofen box. Calpol, again, is very much used. You know, it's a standard. We're told to use it at any point, you know, if there's a fever after 3 months. We're told to give it straight after vaccines, etc. Now, the problem is with it is that it blocks your ability to detox. So you can put these toxins in and then it blocks. There's a liver enzyme that it blocks. So I always say to people, if you're going to use anything at all, do use Nurofen rather than Calpol, because the paracetamol it blocks, but the ibuprofen doesn't. Okay. So you can see where, you know, lots of ear infections, lots of Calpol, lots of, you know, creams, and, you know, you can see where this whole bucket is filling up very, very quickly. And unfortunately, with the children, because their brains are developing, you can see that this, instead of causing physical issues, is going to cause brain issues. And this is why a lot of these kids are not developing, and their brains are not developing as well as they should. Whether it's a mild learning difficulty, whether it's a dyslexia, dyscalculia, or whether it's a full-blown issue, this is where I think it happens. Now, obviously, what happens is when this is all out of sync, they often won't want to eat particularly well. And you can try. I mean, all the mums I see, I think I've seen 2 ever who've, you know, almost weaned their child on Coca-Cola. You know, people don't. We've been brought up with the likes of Gina Ford and Annabelle Carmel and everyone in the back of our minds saying we've got to feed our children healthy food. Most people have blended all the food for the babies, lots of organic rice and vegetables and so forth. But then what goes wrong? Why do they suddenly become really picky? Is it just a phase, or is there a problem? Now, often it's because of all of these bugs and bad bacteria and yeast and toxins in the system that have completely downregulated their taste buds and sense of smell. So very often they just want the very bland processed foods. And also these foods are very addictive. So, you know, as I said, I brought some foods along. I mean, this in itself, these are cheese strings. Let's find it says it's made from unripened cheese, and that it's got citric acid, which is a high glutamate food, lactic acid, paprika, and vitamin D. Not too bad. Now, that's what it shows on the label. How it's actually made, you would not believe. There's probably all sorts of bleaches and things that have gone in there, and processing and, you know, things like that. Margarine has a 14-step process to make it. It's so rancid when they make it that they have to put colourings and flavourings and everything to make margarine. It doesn't melt in the sunshine either, does it? No, it's extraordinary. So please, unless your kids are highly sensitive to dairy, only give them butter. Never. Olivier, all those things, they are full of really bad fats that are going to fug up your brain, fug up the brains.
So what would you recommend if your children are, what would you use if your children couldn't have dairy, or what do you use?
Well, a lot of people using cooking, they use the olive oil, they use goose fat, duck fat, and a lot of people think those are really, but they're really good fats. Coconut oil is very good too. Yeah, it's really, really good.
As a spread, as a
Well, okay, you can get some dairy-free spreads as a pure spread and so forth. They're not particularly good for you at all, but there's a VitaQuell as well. They're not great, but they're okay. We tend to, we've in the past, my little one was very, very sensitive to dairy, and I used to spread an awful lot of mashed avocado and hummus and things like that on his things. We used to do a lot of nut butters, so cashew nut butter or almond nut butter and things like that. So he had the creaminess to it, which he wanted. And so we actually didn't really use very much. We were lucky. He was very sensitive to dairy. He was okay with organic butter, which was great. So butter wasn't our real big issue, but some people are. And, there are things like cheddars here, and you think, okay, this should be quite healthy. It's not too sugary. It's got a bit of cheese in it. Okay, so we got the wheat flour. Vegetable oil. Now, vegetable oil is very, very omega-6, and we need omega-3 in the children's diets. Dried powdered cheese, 11% is cheddar. What's the rest? Ammonium bicarbonate, so that's ammonia. Then we've got autolyzed yeast. Okay, autolyzed yeast, this is a very, very high glutamate food, which is similar to MSG. It's in the same family, and it causes the same response in the brain. Glucose syrup, what else? Natural flavouring. Now, this is a biggie. They're in lots and lots of foods, almost all processed foods. Dried yeast extract. Now, dried yeast extract, again, is another name for a glutamate food, which is similar to monosodium glutamate. And again, this can cause an excitatory in the brain, which can cause attention issues, hyperactivity, a lot of big issues. We test to see if someone's a high glutamate person. Maltodextrin, similar. Natural flavourings, the same. More vegetable oil, more natural flavourings. So this is absolutely stuffed full with glutamates. So although it will say it's MSG free, it has a lot of glutamate in there, so it's going to cause the same reaction in your child's brain as if they were eating, a big MSG hit. So you can see, and this again, here's a Muller Light, and we have various flavourings. That's again glutamate. We've got, and sweetener, aspartame. Now, aspartame is in Diet Coke. Most people wouldn't give their child Diet Coke. They'd probably give them one of these thinking they're quite healthy. And again, this aspartame, when you drink a Diet Coke, you get a slight fizz in your brain? Those are your brain cells dying. Not good. And again, it's this glutamate receptors fizzing around in your brain. So please cut out anything with aspartame in it. A lot of the things like fruit shoots and so forth have them in it too. So you really have to be your child's detective. You have to be very careful about what you see, what you read. It's very easy to, obviously water's easy, but if you want to give them something, just get them some Rock's organic cordial or get some fresh fruit juice, and that's all they need with fizzy water. Sometimes that's all we do. We just put a splash of some fizzy water or a squeeze of lime or squeeze of lemon, and the kids love it. They love the sparkle. They don't really need the sugar. I think it gets harder as they get older as well, because there's a lot of peer pressure when they get to secondary school. I find, a lot of these kids, especially the sporty kids, they want to have their Lucasades and their, Powerades and things like that. And, they are really, really full of colourings and terrible things, which will cause havoc with your kids. Remember, your kids are the special kids that actually need that extra help. Now, these other kids probably their brains are working fine, but it doesn't mean that they're not going to fall apart when they're older. And, I think all of this it depends how fast you detox. So some people are great, they can eat all of that, and it will just, they'll excrete, they'll sweat, they'll poo, they'll just get rid of. They've got this amazing metabolism. We've all know friends that they just look really bright and they eat rubbish. And then you've got these people who just can't cope with even a little bit. I have kids There's one child who I saw quite a few years ago, and he's really, really sensitive. He had Lyme's disease, he was autistic, he had masses of things wrong with him, and he found a quaver on the floor and ate it, and he hallucinated for 2 days. That is how bad and so sensitive he is. So, you just don't... I had no idea that children could be quite so sensitive to these sort of things, but it really matters to some kids, and it doesn't matter to others. So that's where we work together as a team, and we work out what they can and can't have. What I say to people is, to begin with, let's just go super clean. Let's cook how your granny cooked. They didn't have cheddars and Miller Lights when they were growing up. Let's just get back to basics. And even if you can't afford to do allergy testing and food intolerance testing, and you don't know quite what to do, let's start the day with some porridge, or some eggs, or maybe some bacon, some basic stuff. And then for lunch, just do meat and 3 veg, and the same in the evening, and just see how they get on. See if they, go back to basics. Because if you find, if you look on the label and there are more than about 5 ingredients, then it's been highly processed. There's going to be something in there that your child will react to, because they have very sensitive brains, and there will be reactions to things. You can't test for every single thing. There's no test out there that will say your child's allergic to the colouring in curly whirlies. It's just not going to. You can't do that. So you slightly have to go with how your child is. And the best thing is to take out the colourings first and see how they are. And then you will notice the reactions much more. Say they go to a party and they do eat some jelly beans and they go crazy, it's the jelly beans. It might be the orange one, it might be the red one, but you don't know, but still, you can find that out. And sometimes it can make you very zombied as well. So it doesn't have to make you hyper. I think this is where the other people say, well, actually, they seem quite calm having had them. But, if you actually try and engage them, come on, William, come on. They're like, ooh. And it's because their brain's completely fugged up. The same, it doesn't even have to be colourings. It doesn't need to be the things, the actual additives. It can purely be the amount of sugar in there. And a lot of people are very, very sensitive to sugar. If your child's had lots of antibiotics when they're younger, if you are prone to yeast infections yourselves, some people are sort of fungally people, then, your child may well have yeast overgrowth. And if they have yeast overgrowth, then they're going to, as soon as sugar goes into their system, their brains are going to they're going to be slightly spaced out. So it can be why they do react. And actually, in the long term, my aim is with all these children, and it won't happen for them all, but my aim is for them to heal so beautifully that they can eat everything. And there's there's an amazing guy who does this incredible detox stuff called Andrew Hall Cutler. And he says, a child that's healed is a child that you can take to McDonald's every day of the week and there's no reaction. And I think that's great. No one would do that, but you would still, to know that they're not going to get ill. And hand on heart, I would say all 3 of my children, with all the issues that they've had, can do that now. And I can set them free into the world, because I know that they will come back and they'll want to have their juices, their smoothies. My daughter's at a netball tournament today, and she's taken munchie seeds and naked bars and fruit. And I know she'll be showing around her kit with all her friends, because she loves that kind of thing now. And it's great, it's in her now. And I remember the other day we were at someone's house and they produced all these processed sort of sausages and things. And I saw my eldest just going, and it was great. You just sort of, that they, but then again, if they go to a party, hey, they can eat pizza, they can drink Coke. It's okay as a one-off, but it just doesn't happen at home, and they know that there's limits, and it's really important to be able to get to that stage. That's really what this is, the process of what we're trying to do. So with all the healing we're trying to do is we're trying to take the stuff out. So we're getting rid of the rubbish. That's going to go. We're going to get rid of all this. Lots of pure stuff. We're going to clean up our acts. We're going to think, how do we manage a fever? Obviously, if something goes over 40, you will need some kind of something to cool down the child. But actually, very frequently, a fever is showing that the child is trying to get rid of stuff. So, what I say is hold off as much as you can with this sort of stuff. Try a bit of homeopathy, try cooling them down, get them in the bath, nice cool bath, lots of liquids. Make sure they're not in any discomfort. And usually it passes. It really does. And I've got some really good sheets on how to deal with ear infections and all sorts of things. Because, my daughter used to get ear infections. We just used to squeeze some garlic into some olive oil and put them in her ears. Within half an hour, she wasn't in any pain anymore. And she had a good night's sleep and she was fine, We might have kept her off school the next day to make sure she was well. But, generally she was fine. She wasn't in any pain anymore. And we didn't need any of this stuff. And I think that's why they are pretty bright and jolly now, because they don't have all this burden of all these toxins built up in their system. Things like what do you put on their skin if they have a spot or a rash? Try things that are natural. Try tea tree oil. Try colloidal silver. Try natural creams like Salcura, things like that. Aloe vera. Try those first rather than going for the sort of toxic stuff, because a lot of these conditions can be managed. And then what do? We need to get rid of the bugs, and the bugs don't go away on their own, I'm afraid, because these usually, I'm seeing these levels where, maybe a level should be, 0 to 20, and we're looking at 200, 300, 1,000. These are really high markers. Now, sometimes, I do work with a couple of doctors, and I'll send the kids off for, very, very targeted antibiotics or antivirals.
Careful with your ring.
Okay.
Sorry.
And so forth, and it may be very important, but we do start off with natural agents. So we're talking about herbs, we're talking about and strategies to prevent the infections coming back. So Florence knows very well about something called the GAPS diet, and this crowds out the foods that can feed the bacteria and the yeast and the parasites. So it's basically taking away a lot of carbohydrates, or almost all carbohydrates, which sounds really dramatic, but in some kids with serious needs, it can really, really be beneficial. And it's very much going back to good old-fashioned food. So again, it's the sort of eggs for breakfast and maybe a smoothie. At lunch and supper, it's lots of stews, lots of stock, fermented foods, things like this, sauerkraut and so forth. It's not the sort of food that kids generally go for straight away, but it's amazing how even changing their diet to begin with, their taste buds kick back in and they actually start to like some of these things. And you have the kids that like crunchy, like the kids that like smooth and so forth, and we work together with those. So that can be a very helpful strategy. Sometimes it's just too much for the parents to do, and I really appreciate, or the child really does hate that kind of food, and it's really, really hard to do it. I've got some amazing ways. I've had some incredible mums who've just rolled up their sleeves and made breakfast cereals out of nuts and things that you wouldn't even know. They taste like normal cereal, but they really don't have any carbs in them. Incredible. Maybe a bit of honey, and that's about it. It's a monosaccharide, so that's allowed. So that's a very important diet, and you put in a lot of good bacteria. You make a lot of homemade kefirs and things like that. It can be really healing. And we do that with the kids that have serious infections, and serious diarrhea or serious, really severe constipation can be very helpful too. So if there's a gut and a psychology, a gut and a head issue, gut and learning issue, then very frequently we put them on that sort of diet. Or we work towards that diet and hopefully we get there eventually. It can transform lives. It really can. There was one, yes.
I was just going to say, how do you feel about when you read in the newspapers about the government saying that the high protein diet in children is really bad? Because my little boy has quite a high protein diet, particularly for breakfast. Mm-hmm. But then he does pretty much have a full English breakfast every morning before school.
Mm-hmm. But he needs it for his brain to work.
Which I agree with. Yeah. It's quite hard to cook it at 6:30 in the morning. Yeah. But then when I read the government stuff that says no, he's having too much eggs, he's having too much meat. How do I balance that? Okay, with the government policies, they have to think about a global picture. They're looking at stats, and our country now has a greater imbalance of where people are from. People are from everywhere. I very rarely see a British family that come to see me. We have a real mix. It's a real mix. People are, it's wonderful, and I love the colour and
how the world is. But it's changed very much. Now, from your colouring, you've got blue eyes and blonde hair, so you must be of.
Well, maybe not blonde.
Your eyebrows are, but you're of Scandinavian, northern European descent. Yes. Now, the Northern Europeans were, I am too. My grandmother was Danish, we are the type that do need a lot of fat, a lot of protein, and actually we don't do very well on carbs. If you look at people's blood types, whether you're an O blood type, again, that's wheat and dairy don't work very well, and we're looking at much higher protein and fat. If you are more of an A blood type, then you're going to be more of a vegetarian. So we're looking at a lot, you have to factor in, one person's medicine's another person's poison. And remember that, everyone's different. And that's where you have to work with the child and work out. And this is where the testing comes in. There are two or three main tests that I run. The first one, which I generally run for the kids that, a bit dyslexic, a bit out of sync, not sure what's going on, no obvious gut issues, etc. We run a hair test, and it's very, very helpful. The hair test is a hair mineral test. It tests for several minerals: calcium, magnesium, zinc, copper, iron, sulfur, iodine, the works. And it's basically looking at how the body processes those. It's not necessarily body burden, how much the body has. It's more of how they process it. So we're looking at metabolic rate. You can get a really good idea whether someone's more of a thyroid type or more of an adrenal type, whether they're stressed, whether they, you look at the different balances between, say, magnesium and calcium and so forth, and to see whether they're in balance, and that can tell you a lot of information. If you're very high copper, for instance, often the ADHD kids are very high copper and low zinc, and zinc makes you think. Zinc's very important for taste buds, and very, very important for sense of smell. So often they're the kids that are fussy eaters, they're hyper. It's very difficult to sort of get them focused or pinned down to eat, let alone, because they're just always like this. And very often you need to bring down the copper and raise up the zinc. Also, this test is fabulous because it gives you a very good picture on toxicity levels. So we can see whether there is a lead head in your house, or high arsenic or aluminium or even mercury, which I frequently see. So it's a very good picture. It's quite cheap. I think it's £59 for the test. So it's a sort of really easy one. The kids don't have to have a blood test. It's dead easy to do, and the results come back within 10 days. So that's what I usually ask people to do, because it kind of gets people going on what they should be doing, and it gives a good picture. Now, if there's more going on, we know there's more of a disability going on, or there's obvious gut issues, or you hear from family medical history there's a lot of autoimmunity going on and things like that, then we do test something called a one test. A one test is a urine test. It's a first morning urine. It's quite expensive. It's £312, so it's a lot of money, but it does test for 77 metabolites in the body. We're looking at a lot of things, from malabsorption markers, bacterial markers, yeast markers, mitochondrial dysfunction, neurotransmitters, vitamin deficiencies, toxicity blocks, amino acids, antioxidant needs. It's a massive, massive panel. Now, very rarely do I see one thing wrong or two things wrong. I frequently see, these kids are out of sync. They are out of sync kids. So, we're looking at least 10 or 12 markers will be in the high range. And that's where, we will be supplementing them with those. Usually it is a multivitamin that has got very strong amounts of B6 or folic acid or methylated B12 or whatever it is that they need. But sometimes we do have to add in individuals. It says, they're very high bacterial markers and they're low in B12. And there's a block in their mitochondria with aluminium or whatever, and that's what we're looking at, those sort of things. I do occasionally see some very scary sets of results. I had one boy, I think, as I was saying to you earlier, there were 77 metabolites, and I think something like 75 was sky high. And I have sent him off to a paediatrician, and we're trying to sort of piece together why. He's just, no nutrients are going in at all. He's just complete block, and we're trying to work out why that is. So, but it's a really good picture on what is needed. There's a one test which is an optimal nutrition evaluation. So it does test for, pretty much one urine for everything. It gives indications on diet, but it doesn't specifically say your child is intolerant to this or intolerant to that. That's where the food intolerance testing comes in, which I think you might all know about because Florence is quite keen on it. There's Cambridge test, which she knows about, and then there's a York test, there's a Genova FACT test. But there's also, if there's autoimmunity in the family and you are concerned about a gluten issue specifically, then there is a very good new test called a Cyrex test, which is a blood test which has recently come out. It's been in America for years, but it's only arrived in the UK at Christmas time. And this is very, very helpful at indicating whether gluten is an issue more than just celiac disease. Celiac disease, there are several markers that the paediatricians will run, but the main one is tissue transglutaminase. And that is showing specifically if gluten is affecting your gut. Most frequently, the child is small, failure to thrive, loose sort of fatty stools, etc., very popped tummy, etc. That's the frequent, and usually there's quite a lot of behavioural stuff going on. But gluten can affect your whole system, and this is great, this testing, it will test to see whether it's affecting your brain, whether it's affecting your pancreas, causing type 1 diabetes, whether it's going to be causing rheumatoid arthritis. It's a really, really comprehensive, it's not cheap, but you really can. So if you think gluten is a big thing in your family, this, the couple of celiacs hanging around in the background, and or you really all react to it, maybe that's something that we would want to pursue, because we would want to see whether categorically, if it's not celiac, it's something else that is affecting your immune system. And very frequently you find that you have these peptides that come up, which is hitting the brain and causing a problem with the brain. Gluten and dairy are the two kind of big things that we tend to take out of the diet, and people always ask why. There are millions of reasons why, from the fact that they are probably the high, other than nuts and so forth, very high allergen foods. There's obviously the celiac picture. And as I was talking about, there are lots of other antibodies that can be raised due to severe gluten intolerance. From the sort of learning behavioural type of thing and the developmental thing, what tends to happen is very frequently when you eat these foods, you only partially digest the proteins. There's a problem with your ability to digest the proteins, digest the gluten, which is in the wheat, the oats, the rye, and the barley, and then the casein, which is in the dairy products. Casein is not in ghee, which is clarified butter, and there's very low amounts in some of the homemade yogurts. So some people can tolerate those, but they can't cope with any of the other kind of dairies. And that's often... And this casein, again, is very, very difficult to digest. And what happens is, it's not just a gut problem. These partially digested proteins find their way into the bloodstream, and they go up to the brain, and they actually cause an opioid effect. It's as if the child has had some sort of drug response, and it can make them very, very addicted to these foods. So this is very frequently, we see the really fussy eaters, and all they're eating is yogurt and crackers and things like that. They might have a sore tummy, and I'll go on to that in a minute, but also they really, really might be feeding addiction. And I hate to use these words, but it really is frequently happens.
That's quite interesting you're saying about addiction, because I'd actually say that my little boy is obsessed by food. Is that linked? He will steal food to set up in little camps.
Yes, it can be. Well, we would talk about that, yes.
Is that what you mean? Is the addiction what I would...
Sometimes it's to these specific foods, and sometimes it may be because their blood sugars are so... they're not regulated enough that they're always hungry. And there are a lot of people, they've eaten... I don't know if anyone can empathise that they've eaten a full meal, and their brain's still a bit empty, yeah? The glucose hasn't got to their brain. And very frequently it's due to that.
And dairy, is it possible that dairy will affect language?
Very much so, very much so. Well, we've seen in this in little Maya earlier, amazing. She's changed so much. So these morphines, yes, they do. They make the brain all cloudy and foggy, and it's very, you can imagine. I mean, imagine having a terrible hangover. You wake up in the morning and you're just complete, your brain is not working and you can't do anything. And imagine you don't really want to talk to anyone, and you can do things, but very slowly at your own speed. But if anyone else comes in your way, you get really annoyed. And it's that same feeling that if they're coming off the dairy or coming off the gluten, they haven't fed themselves, they're going to feel very foggy in their brain and almost hungover. And then they eat, they feel better. They think, oh gosh, it was just blood sugars. And it wasn't, it was actually feeding this kind of
thing. When they wake up, I mean, my little boy literally, eyes open, and says, what's for breakfast? And then you have to say to him, and you just go, morning, Jack. What's for breakfast? And he literally, if I'm sort of doing the breakfast run, he's like, oh, so that means Daddy's not here, right, so I can't have this, this and this. Right, so you're doing breakfast, right, I'll have this, Mummy. And you kind of go, you're not even out of bed.
That's wonderful. No, we'll talk about him. Yeah, absolutely sort him out. Yeah, there'll be something. Whether he might just be low in chromium or low in B6 or something, or vanadium or something really that is just controlling his blood sugars and making him just absolutely starving from the moment he wakes up in the morning. Is he quite skinny?
Well, this is the frustrating thing. You can count every rib on
yes,
your body. And
exactly.
People go to me, he's very active. I'm active. It's not fair.
Yeah.
He eats treble what I eat.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so there's an amazing book, very sadly the author's recently died, called Children with Starving Brains. And that's what I think these kids are. They're kids that are eating, but the nutrients are not getting to their brains for whatever reason that might be. And that's what we're trying to do. So sometimes it's inflammation of the gut. Very frequently I run stool tests as well, especially if there's an obvious reflux or bloating or smelly farts or lots and lots of gas or lots of diarrhea or constipation. We run stool tests. We frequently find parasites. And the parasites. There was one little boy who came to see me. He was the child you didn't want to have to tea. He was so horrible. He was that child. They all sat in fear of him coming because he was always pulling hair and poking and really, really, really sweet little boy underlying, but just a terror. Anyway, he came to see me and they were just like, oh my God, I don't know what to do with him. And I just said, do you ever feel this in your bottom? And he goes, yeah, all the time. I said, you've got worms. Okay. So I got him to be, he just took the over-the-counter worming stuff. And we were waiting for his big stool test coming up because he always had diarrhea all the time. So waiting for the big test to come back. I said, oh, just worm him in between and we'll see. And yeah, exactly. And, everyone does. And so anyway, and you've got to do the whole family too. And all the others go, oh yeah, we can feel this in our bottoms too. Like, oh my God, the whole family were completely riddled. And they got dogs and, Anyway, because it was Christmas and so forth, it took us a while to get his results back. And I rang him and said, how's he doing? He goes, he's 80% better. And I said, what? He's nice. He's playing with his sisters and brothers. He's been an absolute delight over Christmas. And I said, well, that was just from parasites, And so, it's just little simple, little wiggly worms. It wasn't, you don't think it's problematic, but it can. But the big thing was because I think we got to 80%. It was the 20% we had to. And I think with the runny, and we're basically dealing with the problems he had with his gut, with the diarrhea. And mainly it's dairy. So the dairy's really sorting him out, and we're cutting that out. But, so there were two things going on there. But that was just something really simple. So there's often parasites, there's often bacterial overgrowth, there's yeast overgrowth, there's inflammation. Again, another little boy I'm looking after. Again, a real little terror, really sweet, but, just difficult. The awkward one that, never feels comfortable in his skin. But and I said to his parents, has he ever had tummy ache? Oh no, never had tummy. So I touched his tummy, I went, ow. I said, okay. Oh, I was going, oh my gosh. So we did a stool test, and he had really high inflammation markers. Calprotectin was really high, and the lysozyme was very high as well. Really, really very high. And so we've been treating him for sort of an anti-inflammatory diet and giving him anti-inflammatory herbs. And, we're nearly there. He's not quite there, but he's really much better than he was. And, we've only been treating him since October, so it's, relatively short time. But again, and he's so much more confident and happy and So, it's just great. So you can sometimes, the gut is a big issue, and sometimes it comes by surprise to people because and often they say, yeah, their gut's fine because they are pooing every day or whatever. But then they say, well, do they ever gag on their food? Is there ever, do they ever, so often you see them, they sort of look like they're really hungry. They start their meal and after 3 mouthfuls, they push it away. And it's because they're in pain. And I fundamentally believe that most children would prefer to go hungry than to be in pain. So they push the food aside so they can prevent the pain, because that's worse than being hungry. And they can know that they can snack on something later on, probably, to just get by. Yes?
A lot of parents asking me how long I should be on this health plan.
Okay. This is where the testing can be very helpful, because it can give us a really good idea.
Yeah.
I would say that most kids need to be working pretty hard for a year. The autistic kids that I see, we're looking at 3, 4, 5 years, to be honest, before they're really right. Some kids, as I said, this child at Christmas, 80% better just by worming them. So it's really, but to get that 20%, I think the dairy's making a big difference. I need to catch up with Mum next week actually and find out how he's getting on. But there can be some big stuff. Some people, it's just genetically in their bones, they can't do dairy, they can't do gluten. It really is not, it's just not going to happen. And it's quite good to know about it early on, because then it'll just become part of them. It's much trickier to change a teenager's diet, for instance. But some kids, once you get the bugs out, you get the toxins out, you get the nutrition built up, their gut heals, and they can be normal. They can just, have whatever they feel like.
How do you know that the gut is healed?
How do you know the gut is healed? Well, there are these leaky gut tests that you can do, so you can check to see whether the methylhistidine 3 is still high or not.
And like you said that with your kids, you can just allow them to eat anything now because they show no reactions at all. Absolutely no reactions. Their guts are perfect. They have glowing skin, they focus at school, they've got no rashes, they've got no obvious kind of things going on. So it's
they have strong immune systems.
Symptoms, right?
Yes. And then, some people are really keen to test. Now that can add up, and a lot of people do not have the resources to continuously test. Some people, they just are scientists, they're data people, and they're continuously testing. I have some people who want to test every 2 or 3 months. But actually, I'm not like that. I think, if we see that things are extremely high, we're not going to resolve that overnight. There was a lovely, lovely girl that came to see me just over a year ago, and she's delightful, had severe epilepsy. She was having 300 seizures a week, some full seizures, some just nods and, absences. But, it was really, really extreme. And the mum had noticed that she'd reduced massively just by taking dairy out. So this is where she was sort of interested in the whole diet thing. And we did the one test, and there were an awful lot of things that were out of sync. And anyway, there was also parasites came up on the stool test. So she's been doing a big parasite cleanse, and she found an awful lot of Ascaris, roundworm and things like that coming out in the stools and so forth. And we've been here, so anyway, a year on, but what the trouble is when you're doing this particular program, you have to be very careful that you're not feeding the parasites and making them stronger. So we weren't giving her the vitamins and although she clearly needed the vitamins, we didn't want to make these worms get bigger and bigger, because that's all you're doing is making the worms bigger rather than feeding the child, because they will take precedent. So we held off, and she said, "Can we retest, please?" And I said, "Okay, let's retest." And most of the markers were normalised just in that year. Anyway, what was really exciting to go back was, it was good to see that actually all these huge vitamin deficiencies had pretty much resolved themselves. So there was just there was a bit of B12, a bit of B6, a bit of CoQ10, but there wasn't much more going on. Whereas before it would have been hundreds of pounds she'd have been spending on supplements, and we were able to bring it right down just by clearing out the baddies. But what was really interesting was she has had no seizures for a year. 12th of January was her last one, and that was the day before she started on this antibacterial program that we did. And it was only a 3-day program that we did just to clear a lot of her bacterial overgrowth. And I was not expecting that at all. I really just thought, my gosh, we're going to be dealing with seizures
or maybe they'll, reduce or something because, the mum had seen reduction with the dairy. So we thought, well, maybe we'll, and I wasn't actually aiming, it's not in my remit to treat anything like that, but it was more, let's just clear away the bacteria and see how she develops, because her speech was very delayed. She's a very delayed child, and she hasn't had one for a year, and she's been on no medication. It's just, we're just sort of sitting there going, is this really true? Pinching ourselves, which is really exciting. Now, and there's another little boy in a similar story. We've been, again, parasite picture. We gave him this stuff called diatomaceous earth. He's got cerebral palsy, very hyperactive, was having several absences a day, and he's had no absences since he started just on this powder, which is amazing. So, and again, he reacted very badly to all the medication, so he hadn't been on any epilepsy medication for a very long time. He'd stopped having big seizures, and again, the seizures stopped when they took dairy out. So it was a big, big thing. So very similar stories. The parents came to see me both times with the child unmedicated, saying, what can we do? I said, okay, here we go. Let's see what's in the tests. Okay, this has come up. Let's, and we were really working on the whole development. We weren't actually focusing on one thing. We're looking at the whole child. And that's very important to say. That we're getting rid of the whole bucket load, not just one thing. Any questions at all?
Yeah, I was going to say, just one thing about the Calpol Nurofen. I was told by my doctor that Calpol was better because it was less harsh on the stomach.
That's absolutely right. Ibuprofen is very tough, and people that have to take long-term ibuprofen need to take omeprazole or a proton pump inhibitor to line the stomach to stop it being cut up. And this is why, if we can go down the natural route for any kind of pain relief or fever, I've had a big frozen shoulder in the last 2 or 3 weeks, and I started taking anti-inflammatory herbs, and it just went right down, unbelievably, the pain. Before I was finding it really hard to even click the mouse at one point, and it's all resolved. I have seen an osteopath too, but I think it's everything together. And so you do have to think, what can I do for my child? What can I have? And I'm trying to put together a sort of first aid kit booklet for people so that they know what to be able to do, because, the last thing, I'm very happy to answer emails where you say, oh, what do I do? My child's ill. But, you want to be able to have the stuff in your house and be able to just deal with the situation. And, as I said, if a child is severely ill, then you do need to seek medical advice. You do need to, have stuff like this in the house in case. But if you can just try first and just see if you can bring down that fever on their own, there's some great homeopathic remedies which are really, really helpful. And very frequently they think, phew, I don't have to take that mucky stuff as well. My kids don't like it anyway. So really, it's just purely. I think it's where they say, give a vaccine, give the Calpol straight after, and you're just thinking, oh my gosh, toxins in and blocking the toxins from coming out, and that's where there could be an issue. So I think my kids have had Nurofen 2 or 3 times in their lives, and that's purely because I've had peer pressure from others, like I've had granny staying or something, and I've just kind of thought, it's not going to kill them. Okay, but really, yes, we've had just to go through. So we had Barney with his gut problems and his learning problems. Lara got bitten by a tick, and she had developed full-blown Lyme's disease. We did give her antibiotics for that, but we managed it very, very well with a specific carbohydrate diet, so a GAPS diet. We gave her masses of probiotics, she had masses of vitamins, and she got over it relatively quickly, and she's had no repercussions, whereas most people do have repercussions. And then Charlie was born with severe reflux, and he had a pyloric stenosis, which he had operated on at 7 weeks, and he still was failure to thrive because of a milk allergy. So as soon as we got him it was a milk intolerance, he was on Nutramigen, which helped hugely for him. And we just, again, managed it. But now there was something magic happened at 3. I don't know what happened, but again, he was on all sorts of stuff. And he's now tolerates milk beautifully, and he's probably the best of my 3 in terms of dairy. And, he'll go drink a glass of milk, we tend to do, I mean, we have all sorts of things at home. His big thing was buffalo milk. It was the one thing he could tolerate, and he called it gruffalo milk. And that was his real kind of, and that made him shine. It was just brilliant. The Laverstoke Farm stuff, which you can get from Ocado, is incredible because it's organic, it's biodynamic, it's creamy, it's, you know, I mean, the nutrients in there is phenomenal and easy to access. Any more questions?
I've got a question. You touched earlier when we spoke this morning about stews and things on the
Yes.
diet and curries. You said
Yes.
that. But when I spoke to Florence a couple of weeks ago about gaps, I've got the book, but I haven't
Yes.
read it yet, admittedly. She said about spices, cutting spices down. Now, I'm a bit of a spice addict, and Maya does love spices.
Yeah.
And it would be quite easy to feed her curry
Yes,
and things
yeah.
all the time. But are the spices not?
She doesn't have an obvious gut issue. Okay. Yes, it's a bit, but it's not. You know, it's not like she's got crashing diarrhea. And I think really with the well, we'll see. There are quite good markers in the one test for that. With the GAPS diet, I think it's phenomenal and it can be really, really helpful. However, you know, it is really restrictive. I mean, you've done it, Nina, haven't you? And it's an amazing, and Annie's done yeah, incredible. She's the one to talk to. But a lot of people do find it very hard to do within a school atmosphere. So if your child's at a mainstream school, you often also get question marks from the school. You know, is this, you know, and this is where the red flags can come up from people saying, you know, is this appropriate for a child to not have any carbohydrates at lunchtime or whatever? And sometimes it can be very tough to do full time. But this is why I often say, with the kids that are mildly affected, we just work towards that kind of being, as in it's just old-fashioned cooking really, rather than worrying too much about, you know, obviously if they have a food intolerance, we you know, we cut that out entirely, but you know, generally we're trying to work towards a healthier approach to cooking.
Where do you sit on snacks for children? Because I personally don't agree with snacks. I mean, I like my children to have 3, you know, square meals a day and no snacks in between.
Mm-hmm.
But the amount of other people that give them snacks and almost insist
Yeah.
that, you know, oh, it's been 2 hours since they've eaten, they need a snack. And as you say, you know, the peer pressure of when you're out and everyone's got snacks, and it's almost kind of like, you don't need a snack, you've just had a massive lunch.
The original people who started up the concept of snacks were a finger of fudge. Do you remember that advert? Little boy, a finger of fudge is just enough to give your kids a treat. And that's where snacks came in. We didn't have snacks. You know, I don't remember my mum ever having a packet of biscuits in the car or anything. We just got home and had supper, and it was just very much, it's a new age thing. Schools do it. Schools do a snack in the morning. We all had our milk, didn't we? But I actually, yes, we did take a snack to school. I remember having a snack at break time, but there was definitely, you know, we didn't have these 2 snacks a day thing. That's partly why there is a lot of obesity going on. There's a lot of kids getting bigger because they are eating an awful lot more. And, you know, a snack is very rarely a snack these days. You know, a snack would be an apple. Instead, it's, you know, an apple, a Mars bar, you know, whatever it is, you know, a packet of these. So it's never just a snack. I think, I understand where you're coming from. A lot of kids do not eat a proper breakfast, lunch and dinner either. So that's why they're sort of always hungry. And especially the kids with low blood sugar find that they do dip in between meals because they haven't got their blood sugars balanced properly due to, you know, probably an underlying low chromium, low vanadium, low, you know, magnesium, low B6 or whatever it is, and that you can fix that. What I say to people is this is why the cooked breakfast makes a massive difference to your child, because if they're having a really good breakfast, then they won't have that sugar dip in the middle of the day. Unfortunately, even whole grain bread, you know, I mean, some people do need it or have it, because they just, you know, but whole grain bread gives you that sugar rush just as much as 3 teaspoons of sugar, you know, in terms of the actual spike of sugar, and that's why you do need your protein at breakfast. And the fundamental thing I say, if you're going to do anything, just change your child's breakfast, because the rest of the day is not going to necessarily pan out as you hope, as in school lunch, you're not quite sure what they're going to have. and so forth, or there might be a cake because it's someone's birthday. But if you can get the protein in at breakfast, then they're going to be less likely to want the other things in the rest of the day. Yes, so you need to just see what kind of kid they are, and some people really, really do flake after 2 hours because they haven't had the right breakfast for them.
Because they're like mine, I mean, mine have a good breakfast.
Yeah.
I mean, it's nothing to have.
But if they had a bowl of...
eggs, 3 sausages,
Yeah.
a potato cake.
Yeah.
No, I mean,
Yeah.
baked bean, it's a full-on
Yes.
breakfast. I mean,
Yeah.
a builder would be happy.
Yes.
And then, like, 2 hours later, someone's trying to force-feed them a snack, and they have it, and it's all like, no.
No, but they didn't. But they haven't asked for it. They're not sort of sitting there going to...
If they see everyone else have them, they go, oh, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
One is a breakfast person, but one
Yeah.
invariably it's too early.
Yes.
For breakfast.
My daughter's a bit like that too. We find it difficult to
Surprise
get...
on
Yeah.
like a rice cake. He's gone out to football on a rice cake and a pint of milk because he says I just can't face it.
But he eats a lot of dinner instead.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So you do have to slightly work through. Obviously, you can work towards things, but the snack thing has got very out of hand. And I reckon that when you ask people to change their diet, they can get breakfast, they can get lunch, they can get dinner, no problem. They go, what about the snacks? And that's where I have drawn up quite a comprehensive list of snacks, which I can email on to you. And I'll email it to you, and you can. So that can be really helpful.
Even the breakfast time is to give protein.
Yes.
I mean, egg is all right, but anything else is processed. Like if you're giving sausages, even if you were giving bacon, those all have.
Yeah, you need to get the very good organic and good quality. There are very good online suppliers.
I get mine from a farm.
Yeah.
All the meat.
Or you can have you can have granolas with nuts in them. You can have seeds. If we're having yogurt, then we can have seeds and
Do you
things like that.
recommend cereals?
There are some cereals that, obviously taking away food, specific food intolerance. This is kind of general stuff. There's a really good, delicious cereal called Lizzie's Granola, which is made from oats, and it's got slow release carbs in there, sunflower seeds and so forth. Then it's not too nutty and too, how some of the kids think it's just too crunchy, too difficult to chew on. So it's actually quite easy, and it's very good for sort of slow release. Porridge is great for some. And again, you can put flaxseed in there or sprinkle with nuts and seeds and fruit and all sorts of things on there. So you can get it in. Some people add protein powders to the to the porridge if necessary. But really, I see the kids with the fussiest, most difficult feeding issues. I have kids that literally have one yogurt and one cracker a day, kind of thing, and we build on that. Why? Usually because they've got a reflux, they've got really bad gut issues, and you take those away, or they're allergic to the actual foods they're eating, take those away, and one of the kids that came to see me, she had no speech, she was spinning in the corner, she ate, as I said, a couple of petit flou, a couple of crackers a day, that was it. Terrible constipation, terrible immune system, could hardly walk, and within a month she was eating 3 proper meals a day.
And what about the speech?
Her speech came within a month too. And she's at mainstream school. She's lovely. She's one of my absolute stars, little girl. She's absolutely gorgeous. We had to get her on quite a big program, but she had a lot of stuff going on. And her father was the one that was pushing it all. Interesting, her mother kept on trying to, add a bit of gluten in here and a bit of dairy in here.
And do things because it's easy, don't they? I mean, I had a friend for dinner with her little boy the other day, and the little boy literally hopped around the dinner table. It was mad, and he wouldn't eat the dinner. And my friend said, "Oh, you don't have Nutella, do you? Because he'll eat a Nutella sandwich." I was like, "Oh no, I don't have bread and I don't have Nutella, so I'm sorry, he's going to have to starve."
Yeah.
And she got really panicked, and I said, "Well, he's not going to fall over.
Yeah.
Maybe he does need to starve a little bit to kind of eat properly." And she said, "Oh, but I don't have time. But at least if I've seen he's eating a Nutella sandwich, he's had something." And it's kind of like, but you're
feeding the problem.
Yeah, it's kind of, and he couldn't sit still. This child.
Well, kids do have a very short attention span for food, and actually your stomach a child can only really sit there for 20 minutes, anything beyond 20 minutes, and their body will say they're full. Even if their tummy isn't actually full, their brain will say they're full. So that's why you do need to be really, with these kind of kids, you need to be incredibly organised so that you are ready to go. You say, come on guys, wash your hands, come and sit down. Okay, let's get going. And you literally put the plate in front of them and you've got 20 minutes maximum to feed them. Otherwise they're going to go off. So, and that's why, I actually occasionally do help my 5-year-old still just to have those last few mouthfuls, because I know he needs them, but his brain's kind of, we've chatted and it's gone beyond 20 minutes. And I just know that he just, his brain says he's full, but we know within, half an hour he'll be scratching for a packet of, something.
What would you say to parents that say, oh, how am I going to get him to eat that? And they're having tantrums, the kids having tantrums. And so
well, what I ask is, what do they like? So with this particular girl who was just eating the petit flou and crackers, I said, what does she like? She said, that's all she eats, okay. So I said, right, we're going to get the squeezy fruit tubes, which are just fruit, the innocent ones. So, because she liked the frubes, so we just changed that. And we put rice cakes in instead of the crackers. So we basically took gluten and dairy out. And so she responded to those. And then from there, because it was, a lot of it's to do with the texture. It's very little to do with the taste. It's to do how it feels in the mouth and how it feels in the stomach and how it feels going down the throat. So a lot of it's that. So if you can replicate that, and then of course she could have that. We thought, okay, she can have that. Now and we could put a little bit of vegetable puree into the fruit puree, and we just slowly, and got some chicken stock in, and you just slowly do it, and it does work. And once their tummy's feeling better, they're not feeling so sick. I mean, we all know, I always say to people, imagine you've had an awful food poisoning over 24 hours and you've been really sick, you've had diarrhea, you feel absolutely lousy, and someone puts in front of you meat and 3 veg, you're going to go, oh, no. All you'll want is dry toast or crackers or maybe plain rice. You couldn't cope with anything more. Now imagine if you've got a continuous mild gastric irritation, whether it's a bit of gastritis, whether it's a H. pylori infection, whether it's some other infection, you're always going to feel a little bit nauseous. So you're only going to be eating those foods. So very frequently, so what happens if they do they actually put other things in their mouth? Oh yes, they always gag. I think, well, maybe there is some reflux going on. Maybe they just can't cope with that sort of thing at the moment. And again, you come in with the natural antimicrobials. And it makes a big difference to their choice of food. And once you've got, and also they can be low in zinc. And if they're very low in zinc, because their immune system's so low, they have no sense of smell or taste. So again, sometimes I say, let's just put zinc in. And in a month's time, let's try some more foods. And it's like, oh my God, it worked. And it's because they could actually taste it. It smelled nice. Any more questions?
I've just got one more actually. My little girl can be very, very irritable.
Okay.
What?
Prior to a meal, after a meal, just randomly?
Oh, it can be randomly.
Yeah.
She's a girl.
How old is she?
But she's still young.
She's 9.
She's 9.
She's 9. And it's almost like, you've got the queen talking to you.
Does she work very hard? Is she very diligent?
Yes, she's very hard.
Does she put herself under quite a lot of pressure?
Yes, she does.
Yeah.
Yes.
Does she?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the men in our family don't suffer from that. It's funny, isn't it? Yeah, she can be very, very intolerant of situations.
Does she sleep well?
Yes, she does actually.
Does she eat well?
She eats very well, yes.
Okay, great. It may be that she's just not coping with stress that well. Maybe she needs some adrenal support or some magnesium or something like that just to pick her up. It's usually that. It's usually they sort of, I'm finding almost exclusively when you do these hair tests that they're low in something, And we did our whole family the other day. I'm like, oh my gosh, I've been trying really hard and we're still a bit low in this and that, and it's amazing, because I think, unfortunately, there are less nutrients in our foods these days. It takes a lot more food to get the nutrients out of the food, and this is why.
I was going to say, does that include organic food?
Yeah.
Because what?
Our soil is depleted of minerals generally.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So, but organic food is still.
It's still better usually. I'm not always, but I think the difference is it's got less pesticides, less chemicals, which are going to fill up your bucket quicker in terms of toxins.
Which test would you say to have done mainly? Because basically there's 5 of us in our family. We've all got different issues.
You've all got different issues.
Yeah.
Well, we'll have a chat afterwards. But generally, I would say the hair test tends to be very helpful, and it's cheap and easy to do. And you know, these things do add up. And sometimes you say, look, let's focus in on the person with the most issues. And if there's something really crashingly low, then it's most likely that you're all a bit low in that. So, and you're going to be eating more foods with that in or whatever, and we do it that way. Okay.
Thank you, Lucinda.
Thank you very much.
It's okay. In terms of my clinics, I run a clinic in London on a Tuesday, and then in Stockbridge, which is in Hampshire, which is around the M25, on a Wednesday. The booking number is on my card. It's 0203 397 1824. I have a receptionist there, so they can take the booking. So she's so you know, it's Sloane Square, just central London, near Victoria. So I think there's does the train come from here into Victoria? Does it cross London? Yeah, it does. So it's a 12-minute walk from there. And I usually see the child for an hour, unless there's a sort of more profound issue, and then it's an hour and a half. Okay. Great. Thank you, everyone. Oh, it's lovely. Yeah, really, really nice. Yeah, really nice to meet you.
Yeah, basically, my husband had a hiatus hernia, which had operated.
Did he?
He takes omeprazole every day.
Yeah.
And then my 16-year-old, soon to be 17-year-old son, is now also on omeprazole. Which obviously we don't. We're just about to get a failed for taking. That's what the next process for me is to find out what's going on. Obviously, we don't need to be on omeprazole because he's 16.
I'll just unplug it.
He eats like
I presume it's still recording.
He's skinny as a rake. But you know, he eats anything and everything. He would drink. You know, I think